Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Sonatype, Nexus, repository, and it's something that we're gonna install. We are going to look at the different parts involved, and we are going to look at some code and to handle deployment. Sonatype, the Nexus repository manager, is something that is used quite a lot in the Java world in order to push out releases and manage different modules and so on. So if you are using Maven today and downloading packages, those packages has probably been deployed on a Sonatype Nexus service. And the reason I want to install this and handle this is because we have a situation at work today where we have a bunch of dependencies that we maintain ourselves, and we don't have a good maintenance path for it. So we want to install a Sonatype server in order to handle those dependencies and get a Maven workflow that actually works. So that's why I'm looking into this. So let's switch over to my screen here. And here we have a Sonatype client and a Sonatype server. And on a Sonatype server, I downloaded the the Oracle JDK 8 because it actually required that old JDK. So what I want to start with here is going into my opt directory and unpack this Java version, so we actually have that installed on the system. Then I want to go back to my home directory and download the Sonatype software from their site. So the download Sonatype Nexus 3 latest Unix version. And this repository is temporarily moved, but yeah, we can get the latest software there at least. And it's pretty much just unpacking it to install it. So now I have pretty much installed it. There is an open source repository, so you can git fetch that and build it yourself and so on. This is an easier way to do it. You can buy a license, you get support and some extra features to it. Sonatype can be used for Java, and also C# code or dependencies. You could use it for NPM, you could use it for other systems as well, Composer for PHP and so on. But some of those extra things you need a license for. So then I want to create a link here, so I actually have just simplicity of having Nexus as the directory where it is. And in this Nexus directory, you have a bin directory, and there is your binaries. And then we have a Sonatype work, and this directory contains the actual data that is used by Sonatype. You should probably set up your own user for Sonatype and install it on that user or install it somewhere else in the Linux system. I've just chosen for simplicity to install it in the home directory of my current user. Then I want to create a service. So I create this Nexus service in my systemd. I'm running a Debian default install. And here I want to set up this systemd service. So it's a Nexus service. It will start off the network because you need network in order to run this. I want to set up a Java home for this Java version that I just installed. Say what that is, or else the server will not start. If you start the server without supplying this environment variable, it will tell you that it's missing. And then limit the file here. It's important to change that up a bit so you can handle more files on your system. Could be the default if you want, if you are just doing small things, but per performance you can change it up. Then I just have this script here in order to start and stop the service. You can also run it, and then it will be running in the foreground, so you can actually see what's happening. And then for the user wooden, which is the one I installed now, restart on abort, timeout section, 10 minutes, sounds reasonable, and then multi-user install. So that's pretty much it. Then I do a system control daemon reload, and then I enable the system and start it. And so now I should have a Nexus service on this machine installed, and it is using the port 8081. You can configure this if you want. So now that I have this up and running, I need to log in. And in order to log in, when you sign in here, you need a username, so that's admin. And then it tells you that in this directory on your machine, you have this file where the admin password is. So that is just told to you the first time, and it's in the working directory here. You can change this password in the GUI later on, but this is the default password that you get for your admin user. And that is just something that is unique. So now it tells you that you need to change the password. So I will go in here and generate the password. It doesn't really matter. So there we go. And disable anonymous access. And there we go. So I will add a login here. So I actually have this. So this is admin with that password. So now I can keep track on that. So now we have the web GUI here. And we can see a bunch of things on the start screen here. We can enable this capability for log4j vulnerability and so on. And we can also browse. And here we have a bunch of repositories already set up. And currently, Maven Central is a proxy for the normal Maven repository. So if you want any other package, then you can run this Maven Central one. We can do a health check here and analyze it if we want. So that is a feature of this, that you can analyze the health of a specific repository. Then we have public, and public is a group. And the group contains the Maven Central releases and snapshots. Releases and snapshots are our own things that we have deployed. So our internal hosted things. So these are of type hosted. And then you see here we have also the same for NuGet with a proxy, hosted, and group. We will not look into NuGet at this time. So if we go in here and look at blob stores, so we have a default blob store. So that is the object storage where things are stored on disk. So in a pro install, you can create multiple blob stores, but I believe in the free version, you only have one blob store, but that should be just fine for our use case. What we want now is to add some privileges, because I would like to have different keys and different logins for a couple of different use cases. And the use cases I see is that we want to have one user that could read from our global repository. I want one user that could deploy snapshots, and I want one user that could deploy new releases. So I want to have different roles and users for that. In order to do that, I will create a new role here, and let's call the first role here just Nexus. So that is our Nexus reader. We can have that as our name for that one. And then we want to add some roles here. And these are a bunch of things here, and I don't really know why they have made this list so narrow, because you can't really read it all. But what you want to look for is NX as Nexus repository view, and then we want to find view Maven. And in this view Maven, I want to look at something called Maven Public. So Maven Central. Maven releases. Here we have public. So I want to have public read. And I want to have Maven public, not add, Maven public browse. So the two roles I have Maven public browse and Maven public read. Those are so I can read this public repository that has this group that has both the central one, snapshot, and releases. So that is our reader. Then I want to create two deploy roles. So I create the first role here, I call it still Nexus role. I call it deploy deploy releases. That is something I wanted to do. And then when I look at these roles, we go again to the viewer one. There is an admin one, but I believe that is for this admin interface. So the view ones are for the API. So I look at the view, Maven, and here I want to have the release one, not the snapshot one. So we have snapshots in the bottom here. And we could give it all of the things that we can do. So releases all, as in star, could be one. But I want to have add, not delete, edit, let's see, and read, and browse. So I want to have all but delete. I don't want this users to be able to delete packages. That we will do in this admin GUI instead. So that is the second role that we add. And last but not least, we will create one role for the snapshot deployment. So we will have snapshot deploy snapshot. So that's the last role I want to create. And then we want to look again for the view. And in this case, we want to take view Maven snapshot. So that's the last one we want. And snapshot is at the bottom here. So we want to do read, edit, not delete, browse, add, and not all of them. So those 4. So now we can do something with snapshots as well. So now I want to create a bunch of users that uses these. So I will create a user called Nexus reader, and we can have a bunch of different names and so on for this. I will give it the password QWERTY at the moment. In your deployment, of course, give it a better password. It should be active and it should be using the Nexus reader role. So we have granted that. Let's create the next one. So this is deploy releases. Create that one. And real email addresses, so you can actually change the password if it is lost. But if you have the real this admin GUI, you can do it, of course. So we add deploy releases there, and last but not least, we will create the user for snapshots. Deploy snapshots. After that, we should have a system that is pretty much configured and done in order to do all the things I want to do. And now we can use code in order to deploy things and just configure our system. So if we go here to my screen, and I will open a new window here. So there is a file in our home directory under the directory M2. And then we have this settings XML. And here we can define different users and what they can do. So first off, we have a server here that is Nexus releases, and we have a user that we call deploy releases, and then we had a deploy snapshots user. Snapshots, I believe that was the names, yeah, releases and snapshots. And then both of them had the password QWERTY. So now I know that for a specific server I called Nexus snapshots, I can log in with these kind of things. And for a server called Nexus releases, I can log in with these username and password. And then I also have a specific local profile here that I call local Sona ID. And that is something that I also would use in my POM file in order to sign the packages. So if you want to sign something, you create a profile here and you give it some properties. So I have a GPG executable, and I just say GPG there. So GNU public guard or something like that. So it's something instead of pretty good privacy, this PGP. So it just shows to switch the letter out. And then I have a password for that. I have created a new signing key here. So the only thing you do is gpg -- create signing key. So you create the signing key, you can look that up. But you can see here that you can define it. And last but not least, I have also defined a mirror here. So I will use the public Maven repository of our server here in order to get all the packages. So I can change that to 2 because I have did this one time before in order to try it out. So now it's pointing to the right server. And if I go back here and we look at the actual code, so I will look at the test module first off. So in this test module, we have a name service, and here we can say explorers. So we get the name explorers here. And in the POM file of this service, so with the name service, the only thing it has is this function where we get the name. And we have created this test module, and it has a snapshot version. It will use Java 11. You can use Java 17 or whatever that you like. And we have also configured the encoding for this service. And I also created here a connection to my GitHub repository, so I can actually create the releases and send them up there and tag them and everything. And then I have this distribution management. This is a new thing that you will use in order to send things to Nexus, both releases and snapshots. And the ID you see here should be the same ID that we specified under the servers section in our settings XML. So here I will change up these IPs. So these snapshot repository will use the credentials for the snapshot Nexus, and the normal repository for releases will use the releases one. So whenever you deploy a snapshot, it will use this thing here, and whenever you create a new release, it will use this repository up here. Then I also added our public central repository down here, so it should fetch packages from there. Now we have defined the mirror, but we can also put it into the XML file here if we want. Then I have 2 dependencies here. These are just added dependencies, so I can see that it actually fetches something. Doesn't really matter for this use case. And then down here we have the Maven plugin for source. So this will attach sources to the build process, create sources and so on. And it will know no jar fork. And so this will create the source package. So when you deploy this to Sonatype, when someone wants to use your repository, your specific module, they can have the sources as well for debugging purposes and development. That is very much appreciated. So I think you should add that. You can also add this where we attach the Java docs in the goal of jar. So it will create a Java documentation that you have created in your files, and then push it out with your plugin, so that is easily readable with anyone that wants to use your plugin or module. And then we have this signing plugin. So this is the Maven GPG plugin, and then we have our signed artifacts as the ID during the verify phase, and the goal is to sign it. So that we'll use the credentials in our settings files. When it comes to GPG signing, I have to actually tell it the the password every time, so perhaps you don't need to actually add that to the file. I think it's a better security to actually type it in every time, so nobody that comes to your computer can sign a package and send it out without your knowledge. And then we have Maven deploy. You could use a plugin from Sonatype in order to deploy and so on that they have built. It has a lot more functionality, but for our use case, this default installed deploy plugin does exactly what we need. So I don't use the Sonatype one. If you want more functionality, look into that one. It can push snapshots to releases, it can delete releases and so on. But I want to use the default one. And last but not least, we have the Maven release plugin, and it will create releases for us. And here we have the allow timestamp snapshots. So I want timestamp on my snapshots, version submodules, and use the release profile. I will not use that in this case. And the release profiles I will use is the release, and then tag name. I would just want the project version for this tag format. I don't want any extra. If you don't specify this here, you will get the module name dash version number as your tag name, and that is very clunky to read. And then remote tagging, I have set that to false, and then the deploy goal is deploy. So you can have the remote tagging if you want as well. So these are some of the settings you can have. There is a bunch more of them, of course. So that is the setup we have here. If we switch over to the console here and go into my GitHub test module directory and then run nvm deploy, I think I need to specify the Java version. Yeah, so I will expect Java home, and it's in USR lib JVM Java 11. So now I can do a deploy, and if I run that deploy, it will create a Java doc, and it will ask me to sign this package. So I will enter the password, and then it signs it and then sends it up to our Nexus server. So if we go over to our Nexus server here and then go into the normal mode and browse our snapshots, we see that we have a snapshot here, version 5 snapshot. And if we look at the public, we see that as well, because this, as I said, have all the things that we have proxied from our central repository. It has the snapshots and the releases, so everything will be shown up here. Then we can use this normal flow to create releases. Release prepare, and this will ask us for what version we want to run. Let's see here. MVM release prepare. Failed to go. Okay, I have local modifications. Yeah. So here we want to add our everything that we have changed here. Of course. So that is a very good thing that it actually tells you. Small changes. Do changes during video. I will push this up to GitHub, so you can see everything on GitHub if you want. And then we will do the actual release prepare. And we will create 0.0.5. And I will use that as my, the next snapshot version will be 0.0.6 snapshot. So it will run through that prepare process, and when it have done that, it has created the tag for this specific release. So when I do perform now, it can take that tag, check it out, and actually create the release and send that up. So here it will also sign that released package. So I guess it will ask me for a password again. No, it remembered the password. And there it has sent up the release to Nexus Cloud. So if we go over to Nexus Cloud here, browse releases, we see that we have this version 5 here. And if we go to our public, we can see that we have both version 5, the release that we just created, and the snapshot that we created earlier. So now we have done releases and we've done snapshots. So now we want to use this specific one. So what we want to do now is switch over to my client here. And I want to go to my GitHub repository. Let's see here, test program. So here I want to take this specific repository and I want to git clone that. So this machine here is a new install of Debian. It doesn't have anything on it more than I added Java 11, I added Maven and Git. So I can actually git clone this repository, and I can also go in here and do a Maven package. And the reason I want to do this on this newly installed version is because I want to download things from the central repository, and then I don't want them to be local, because if I have the versions local already, I won't fetch them. We can look into this program as well. So we go over to this screen. So what I check down now is this main program here. It's just something that uses this name service and types hello, that name. And then in our POM file here, we have defined to create this program. We have added the repository for this public package. And then we have a couple of dependencies here. We have our test module that we want to use. In this case, we actually want to use version 5. And we also add the Apache Commons and Log4j. And then I have this assembly plugin, so I can actually create a Java program. And it will create a jar file with dependencies. So add all the dependencies into the jar file. It will use this Maven, this org EI main as our main class, and so on. So that is something I have a video about already, how to create these kind of programs. Before I do that, I want to edit my own settings file, of course, here. So we go into M2 settings XML, because I don't have one on this system. So if we go over to my repository again, I have prepared this settings file here. So we will copy that over. And here we have the central ID. So that is where we want to fetch our packages. And I want to use the username Nexus. And I use the password again here for clarity. Or did I call that Nexus Reader, perhaps? Let's look at our repository here. So we have the right username. Nexus Reader, yeah. So I will use the Nexus Reader username and password. And I will have this specific host here. So I add my IP and the port 8081. Repository Maven public. So now I have that, and if we look back to the program here, we also have defined the public repository up here in this one. So now, with a little bit of luck, we should be able to build this one. I want to push the new changes, of course, of my client here. So I will go to my home system here, test program. I did some changes to the POM file and to the source directory changes. Push that up, and then I can fetch origin here, reset to the origin version instead. So now we should use the version that we created So we actually use that version 5 plugin. So if we run this and package it up, it should go and fetch both the dependencies from our central repository that we are required to have, our own module that we have created, and also build it and create this packaged file that we can actually run locally on our system here. So it will take a while to actually download all the dependencies and everything that we need. So now it have created the whole program for us. If I run java jar target test program with jar with dependencies, we see here, hello explorers. So it actually works. To run that program, we got our module downloaded from the central repository. If we go back here and browse again and look at public, we see now that we have a bunch of packages. We don't only have our own package here that with our snapshots and test module and so on. We have a lot of other things that we have proxied and have locally stored now from the central repository, but these are the versions that we mirror on our end. So we have a bunch of things already installed here, and when next time that we want to use them, even if we have problems with our internet connection or anything like that, we can go to this repository and get the latest version, or get the version that we have downloaded before from this proxy instead. And we also have the benefit, if we have multiple users that uses this system, all of them don't need to go to the internet and fetch the package every time. So this was what I wanted to show you today. I wanted to go through how to set up Sonatype Nexus Repository Manager. I wanted to go through how to deploy snapshots to it, how to create releases and deploy to it, and also how to use the setup proxy that is already available in the Sonatype Nexus Repository Manager. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And if you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. And I really hope to see you in the next video.